Welcome to the A Studio. It's still chaos today, not constructing, not yet. 2 more days. I'm just waiting for 2 more deliveries. 2.7 tons are still missing to go in here, and then I will start building a room within a room studio. If you're interested in that, don't forget to tune in a couple of days here on this channel. Today it's all about mastering. This was requested by a lot of people. As you might remember, yesterday I went to my mastering engineer, who's among the best in Germany at least. He's mastering all of the big German bands, some Schlager here and there, also for Robin Schulz and also for a lot of German hip-hop, gangster rap kind of guys. He knows how to master. He's mastering already for 30 plus years, owns an amazing studio with a lot of outboard gear, and yesterday he taught me and showed me step by step what he does to one of my tracks, which helped me a lot to gain a perspective of like where some frequencies might to be tweaked, and the next time I can implement that into my song directly and get even to a better result. And today I'll try to recreate that with the tools that I have available, and hopefully this way I will learn to master a little better, tweak my songs better in mixing, and also share with you all of the little techniques and tricks that help to get like that last percent out of a song.
I've got a lot of honey, I'ma give you. If you really want me, baby, come through. Move a little closer, I know you want to.
I've opened up Logic, dragged into it my pre-master. That's the file that I summed within my DAW. That's my final mix. That's everything like to the limit of my power that I can do to mixing. You just heard in the intro the song. By the way, it's called Do To You and will be out in a month. And for the pre-master, it's important that it just doesn't clip. A lot of people say -4 dB, like the peak, -6 dB. It doesn't matter. Just make sure it doesn't clip. And then you send that file to mastering. Yesterday in the session, we took exactly the same file. And the first thing he did was actually the gaining, just like the loudness, which is nothing artistic. It's just getting a certain level, using metering to check that level. And he's of course doing it with analog outboard gear, with multiple limiters, L2 and then 2 other ones that are like very rare. 2 of them actually more used in a way a compressor would be used. So in between a compressor and a limiter, not limiting fully, but already limiting. So we'll here just first of all use Ozone, just because a lot of people own that plugin. And even my mastering engineer that mixes 80% with analog gear is still using Ozone for 2 or 3 things. And actually the last limiter in his chain is the one by Ozone. So the maximizer, open up Span, my favorite analyzer, and just let the song play. It's important to use the loudest part of a song, obviously, to do all of that. So I've looped it up and yeah, like 1.8 dB, never more than 3. He doesn't do anything more than 3, like usually 1, 1.5. It's a very subtle art mastering actually. And he does the limiting first. And just to let you know, like this is what he did to my song. To any other song, it might depend, it might be different, there might be more processing needed or different processing or less processing. It highly depends on the source material. This one right here is just a real life case of mastering, how to master, what it sounds before and after. And again, first is the gaining, pushing the song into the limiter and getting a certain amount of loudness. That is 90% already to the final loudness so that we know what the song will actually sound like, because in mastering the limiting does the most. It does the most damage, it changes the sound the most, so we do it first. Then we'll pick a second limiter. Let's pick the one by Waves, because he used an L2, a real one, so we're using the closest thing, which is of course the L2 by Waves in stereo. And also here we'll just give it around 2 dB. I've also opened up Inside by Isotope, which gives you a good estimate of your LUFS, which is like the modern way to measure it. Or you could use dB RMS, this really depends. And just pick any other song you like, drag it into your DAW, and check what kind of loudness it has and copy it. Then he used the dynamic EQ. As far as I remember, it was 110 Hertz and like a dip of 1.1 dB around. So basically, whenever that frequency reaches a certain threshold, it's EQ'd down. So it's an EQ that reacts to the material, which is very intelligent. Something hardware just can't do. So he actually did that in Isotope Ozone 9. And then there was a second frequency, I think around 10K, where he did something very similar. And he did all of that always separate for mid-side. He used the MS mode for all of these tweaks, because this way, especially in mastering, you can control what's happening in the middle, usually the voice and the bass and the kick, and what's happening in the sides. And you need to make sure that the vocal is like the main star whenever it is a vocal song. So both these frequency dips just in the mid signal, the stereo signal left without any processing. Then he used an EQ, just one simple change in the very low end, 88 Hertz, with a low shelf in his manly EQ that I unfortunately don't have. We're using here by Waves the linear phase EQ. Just a tiny change. Like this just lowers the volume of kick and bass a hint, and this way we get a little more room to push everything else. Because as you know, mixing, mastering the song occupies a certain amount of space. The lower and the heavier the elements, the more space they take away. If you want to make everything louder and perceived louder, you have to compromise somewhere and just take away usually a little bit of the low end. Making kicks shorter helps, reducing bass, reducing kick, and introducing like upper bass frequencies that sound still like bass and on small speakers feel like bass, but don't have the very low energy that will muddy up your mix or take away of the space you could have to push the song even louder. So yeah, just taking away a little bit here. And then he used a compressor, I think the one by SPL, Iron, very expensive compressor. And that was like one step that surprised me. Of course, yes, the compressor and mastering, why not? But he used it in the slightest way. Like the needle was barely moving. So it was more like a coloring than actual full compression. But it still changed the groove in the slightest way and gave it that certain like analog master kind of sound. So you really carefully have to listen to this to actually hear it. I mean, of course, here with software it doesn't make as much sense as with analog gear, but hopefully soon for the A Studio we'll get some analog gear and test that as well. And that was basically it. That was everything we've done to the song. Limited, 3 limiters, 1 compressor, just doing a hint, an EQ, getting rid of like the very low frequencies a tiny bit, and then 2 dynamic EQs, like attacking 2 frequencies. And there was another thing we did was like a de-esser around 10-12K, reducing by half a dB, very narrow, just to isolate like a certain frequency that was resonating a tiny bit. And that was it. So the song, it's still the same. It still sounds very similar. It's a lot louder, and it's loud without destroying it too much. Whenever you limit a song, you will destroy it to a certain degree. If you use analog gear, that destruction might sound really nice. If you use in-the-box mastering capabilities, it depends on the plugins, it depends on how you process it. You can get very close, but with analog gear, I mean, at least for mastering, just makes a lot more sense. And so far you might be disappointed because there's not a lot happening, not a huge change, but I got a couple more tips and tricks, like my personal ones whenever I master someone else's songs, because I get a lot of songs by people that aren't mixing perfectly, so I have to use a little more of processing and trick a little more to get somewhere. So what I really love to use is by Gullfoss. I've already explained a couple of times that I don't really know what it does, but it just sounds amazing. It's like kind of matching your song to like the perfect frequency curve, and you can just use 4 like sliders: recovery, tame, bias, and brighten to change the sound. So let's listen to it without it and then with it. And again, it's like a subtle setting. It also does all of that in a dynamic way. Left and right, you can like make sure that it doesn't affect the very low and the very high. I love to use it. Another trick I love to apply is using a low cut. Be very careful with this. Again, a lot of rumble, unnecessary energy is in the very low end. This song right here, you could cut it until like 36 Hertz. First of all, most speakers don't produce frequencies that low, and it will affect your loudness. So if you want to have a louder mix, consider cutting the very low end that you can't hear anyways. If you can't hear it, no one else will probably be able to hear it. I know bass is very important. We all love bass, and most producers cramp a lot of bass into a song, but the very, very low end is just eating up a lot of energy. So try it out, just listen to it, and when you have the feeling the low end is like missing and going away, back off again. But here, 36 Hertz, no problem. I mean, we could engage also here by waves the L3, which is a multi-band limiter, which would be also my next tip, but we can now engage just a solo for the very, very low frequencies below 32 Hertz. And I mean, just listen to it. There is not much happening, so we can cut a tiny bit into it. Let's listen to it with the low cut and without. Depending on your speakers or headphones, with headphones you actually have no chance. You might not even be able to hear the difference with cutting it and not cutting it. So then just cut it. If you can't hear it, get rid of it and make sure there's more room for everything else. And then what I also love to use, also here in Ozone, it's something that is very, very, very handy. Where is it? The imager. Yes, you can multi-band image like your song and make sure to have certain widths at certain points in a song. Let's create another band, maybe another one. So we can now say everything below 100 Hertz to be mono. We can make sure that everything below 100 Hertz is a little bit wider. Be careful with this, because if you spread it out too much, it becomes thin in the middle. And then the high frequencies above, like, let's say 3K, we can spread them even more. But again, be careful. This depends on the source material. If someone already used a lot of widening in their mixing, don't widen it even more. It will start phasing and you will lose the mono capabilities of it. But if someone is just like not doing it at all, then give it a lot of width. People will love that. Yeah, like a little sparkle, a little more width. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So use multiple limiters to not just make one do all of the work. This usually will sound a lot worse. And then EQing, cutting the low end, consider it at least. boosting the top end a tiny bit usually helps to get that hi-fi sound that a lot of people love. But again, this depends on the production. For example, here in the song, we didn't do it because the top end was already kind of bright. So we left that all alone. And I hope these mastering tips and tricks will help you to improve your song. Again, if you do more than this, if you ever EQ anything more than like 3-4 dB, go back to the mixing stage, especially if it's your song. And also, if you work together with a mastering engineer, send them your song, ask them first for feedback so they can tell you like the big mistakes you've done. You can correct them in the mix where you have way more control, and then let them master it. That's usually, in my opinion, how you get the best results. And over time, you will get better mixing and there will be less that has to be done in mastering, and the engineer can concentrate on like getting it loud and perfect and that little analog special voodoo that some people hear and some don't. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know about your favorite mastering plugin and techniques in the comments, and we'll see us tomorrow back again here in the studio doing a Q&A. If you're interested to ask me anything, check out my Instagram, first link in the description. Just ask me whatever you want to ask me and it will be included in tomorrow's video. Thanks a lot. Sign out.
Think of the things that I'll do to you. Things that I'll do to you.